Hi everyone. So today here I want to look at
I.
Sabine Hossenfelder, her video on specifically titled "Flat Earth Science is Wrong but Not Stupid." And in the description here, she says, "In this video, I will explain what flat earthers believe, why they believe it, and why I think scientists should take flat earthers more seriously." So I'm just gonna read this kind of as I go. I didn't really watch any of it, but something that we're going to see hopefully. Sabine Hossenfelder, she was a physicist in her own right, but she's made a lot of weird criticisms about her field, um, and we're going to look at specifically this portion here and look at her defense for why flat earthers are not stupid. She's made some incredibly awful takes, and I hope that this is one of them, because we know that the earth is round. There are hundreds, probably thousands of evidence to suggest the earth is round and not flat. No matter how you want to say it, some people are a lot dumber about it than others. If you look in Antarctica, there's a 24-hour sun. Explain that. Explain we can observe curvature in the earth, right? We look at other planetary bodies and they're round. Okay, why are they round but we're flat? These are the kind of things that we need to keep in mind. Just use, like, you can really debunk a flat earther with common knowledge, really just common knowledge. So, anywho, I want to get into it here. We're going to start with just the opening. I don't really think there's anything that she says where she takes a personal take where she's like, the earth is flat. Because if you're a physicist, you cannot physically believe that you would just be so ignorant to think that the earth is flat. But you never know. She might just be like, earth is flat. They're right. You're wrong. Earth is a disc. But we will see.
As many people in science communication, am fascinated with flat earthers. Here you have a group of people steadfastly rejecting evidence that's right in their face. Today I want to tell you why I nevertheless think flat earthers are neither stupid nor anti-scientific, most of them.
Um, I want to make a point there. She says not non-scientific. They are extremely non-scientific. They reject all forms of any scientific evidence that suggests that the Earth is flat. They might look at their own observations and say, Earth, I look outside and the terrain is roughly flat. Maybe there's a hill or two, but it's flat. I don't see curvature of the Earth. Um, that's the kind of thing that is anti-scientific, because you're going off of your own observation and rejecting thousands of other observations that suggest the earth is round.
Anyway. More importantly, I also want to explain why you should not be embarrassed if you can't remember how we know that the Earth is round. But first I have to tell you what flat earthers actually believe and how they got there. The most popular flat Earth model is that of a disk where the North Pole is in the middle and the South Pole is an ice wall on the edge of the disk. But not all flat earthers sign up to this. An alternative is the so-called bipolar model, where both poles are on the disk, surrounded.
Quickly, I want to go because I was trying to think how you could just easily disprove this. So, the reason that this is stupid. So imagine I think this is America right here, right? So if I start in America and I want to go to Germany, okay, I could cross the North Pole. Okay, that's because the Earth is a sphere. I could do that. And typically, maybe you'd go around. But this is just a 3D globe spread out in a flat map, right? Kind of compressing the globe almost, or unraveling it and then making it a circle. Um, in reality, if you wanted to go the long way, like let's say I was in Chile or something, and I wanted to go to um, India, right? So over here, I guess I could go like down through the South Pole and up through. But this makes no sense. That assumes that there's an ice wall. We have never observed an ice wall. What's past the South Pole? Well, when you pass the South Pole, or the North Pole for that fact, you're gonna reach more water because it's not as cold there, right? So we have observed when we pass the South Pole, we start in water, we hit that ice area, we keep going, right? Or that the colder area, I should say. Not all of the South Pole is ice, but then we keep going. There's more water there. So can you explain that? No, you can't, because you say there's an ice wall, even though you can't just magically fall off the earth. That is just an unscientifically stupid thing to say, because if you want to prove to me that there's an ice wall and you can fall off the side of the earth, go ahead.
On the edge of the disk. But not all flat earthers sign up to this. An alternative is the so-called bipolar model, where both poles are on the disk, surrounded by...
This is also stupid. And that's just for the sole reason, like, okay, now you kind of make more sense with the poles, I guess. But you still have this wall. Like, it makes no sense. If you travel in one direction on the earth and you keep going, you will intersect regions that would not make sense on a disk. Like if I start in America and I would go to my left, right, if we're looking at this straight on, if we go to the left here, we would end up in Japan and Russia and China, right? We wouldn't just hit a wall, okay? Like literal airplanes do this. I don't know what's so hard to understand about that.
By water that's held by a rim of something, maybe ice or rocks. And a minority of flat earthers believe that Earth is really an...
This one would make sense, but again, you take a flight, you go left, you're going to end up in China, Russia, or Japan, right? If you started on in California, right? So I don't really understand. You can indefinitely go to the left forever, right? No, you end up at the other continent, and that's because you're literally going around the curvature of the earth. This is like the most ridiculous one in my opinion. Another thing is, if it's an infinite plane, there's only a finite amount of water in the earth. Okay, there's a finite amount of matter in the universe. It's a little stupid to say that there's an infinite amount of water. How deep is the ocean there? Is there species when you get far out? Like, it just doesn't make much sense. Not only have we not observed an infinite plane of water, it just doesn't make much sense.
Infinite plane. They mostly agree, though, that gravity does not exist, and that the observations we normally attribute to gravity come instead from the upward acceleration of the flat.
That just makes no sense, and you could still have gravity on a flat
Earth. As a consequence,
So I don't know why they are so heavy on this idea that, gravity doesn't exist because, the disk of the earth is moving. Well, if the disk of the earth is moving, where is the moon going? Where is the sun going? They can't explain that. Is it moving relative? What evidence do you have for that? You don't, okay? You really don't have any evidence for that. And it makes no sense.
Apparent gravitational acceleration is the same everywhere on Earth. I explained some weeks ago that this is in conflict with evidence. We know that the gravitational acceleration is most definitely not the same everywhere on Earth.
This is the first nonstick with no coating. The titanium always pan.
I hate these ads.
The idea that gravity is due to upward acceleration also causes other problems. For example,
I appreciate that Sabine debunks the fact that she does not believe in flat Earth and that it is stupid. I'm not really sure what she's talking about with that video. I don't know if the context is her trying to disprove what gravity really means, or she said about gravity not being the same everywhere on Earth. Maybe just like a fractional difference in gravity. I could imagine, a differential in the gravity that you feel. Like, let's say if you're at the, um, you know, depending on the conditions, that is like an external force weighing on you. But that wouldn't really be gravity, right? Maybe if you're at the top of Mount Everest versus at ground level, maybe there's some external force other than gravity. Although, like, I guess if you're at Mount Everest compared to down here, right, if you were elevation, just difference, you might have a minute, right, because gravity is the attraction of two objects, and gravity is dependent upon Newton's law of gravity. I forget the formula's exact name, but it's a square difference in the distance, right? But that difference in relative scale to the overall force of gravity is so minute. I mean, it really isn't going to be that much of a difference. So I'm not really sure what she's talking about there, but and I don't want to comment too much on if I believe what she's saying is complete horseshit or not, because I don't know what she's really talking about there.
You have to assume that the moon and the sun accelerate along with the flat Earth, so we don't just run into them. That's an ad hoc assumption, which disfavors the flat Earth hypothesis against models where the orbits of the moon and the sun can be calculated from the gravitational law.
Okay, I hope we keep this rhetoric that it is dumb and is easily disproven by simple logic. I think, and I hate to go off on tangents here, but a big problem with society these days is you have so many pseudoscientific people. They just, like, it shocks me how little people know about the world around them. You ask people, I'm a religious person, I'm a Christian, but I substitute science where necessary, because you can't look at the fossil record, you can't look at evolution and say it's not happening or God planted it. Not only does that make no sense, it's just plain wrong. If you say there's no fossil record or there's no evolution, you're just plain wrong. And I'm sorry, that's just the truth behind it. If you don't believe there's evolution, I can show you many examples of evolution. Peppered moths in, when there were coal mine. Every student, I think, learns this, right? If you turn, and it's nice and easy to see with color in species. If we subject the average background color to be black, white-colored species will turn, just by chance, and they'll have genes that will make their fur color black or something. It's not hard to imagine what's going on there.
But that's not the only problem. You also have to get the moon and the sun to somehow circle around over the disk to explain day and night and the phases of the moon. To get the day-night cycle to be noticeable, you have to shrink the sun and move it closer to the Earth. You also have to somehow get the radiation of the sun to be direct.
This model is also stupid because, if we're looking here, right, and we have an observer, let's say where I'm at in Pennsylvania here, you have a direct line of, there's nothing blocking the sun's view from you, right? So theoretically, we would see the sun and the moon, and there would be no night because, it's a little stupid to say it's a conical shape looking down on the Earth, right? There would be some light, maybe coming at an angle to Pennsylvania, right? South America, the poles, right? It's not this little cone of direct radiation like we would like to think, right? And this is explained by the spherical Earth, because if I have the sun here, the Earth here, right? Let's say the Earth is my hand. Hopefully you can see my webcam. If I have the Earth right here, right, and here's the sun, right, if I'm holding it this way, this will be the sun. This is the Earth, right? And I'll actually make the sun a sphere because it is a sphere, okay? If the sun is here and I'm on the Earth, I can see the sun. Okay, if the sun somehow gets behind me, I can no longer see it, therefore it appears dark. If I'm on a plane, no matter where I put the sun, I can still see the radiation it's giving off in terms of light, So it's a little dumb of a model. And how do you account for the moon? How does the moon not interact with the sun? Although I guess it could be like a little higher or lower. Um, but then even then, if like the sun, well, we know the moon's closer, right? So it would be lower than the sun. If the sun's all the way up here, that means it's actually diffusing more light at certain places. Also, how do you explain for temperature differentials in the Earth, right? Some areas are hotter than others. And like 30 degrees plus or minus from the equator, it is pretty hot. You have deserts, and that's because of the way that the sun hits the earth, either diffuse or less diffuse, and it's direct radiation versus indirect radiation, right? So I just wanted to point out why this model is dumb. It doesn't make much sense. Okay, so let's move on.
Fractional. That's many more ad hoc assumptions. But even with those assumptions, the size of the sun will change during the day more than we observe. And no one has ever successfully predicted solar eclipses on a flat Earth or calculated the observed motions of the planets. The bottom line is, it's not easy to improve on today's scientific standard. It was for good reasons that the hypothesis of a flat Earth was abandoned more than 2000 years ago. Some people suggested to me that flat earthers do not actually believe the Earth is flat. They are just mocking people who take scientific evidence on trust. And that, let us be honest, is something we all do to some extent every now and then. And it is probably the case that some flat earthers are indeed just pretending. But
I mean, not really. I think one of the biggest melting points for flat Earth is, even in my own religion, we see that people interpret some verses in the Old Testament, which I don't even really believe in the Old Testament, but the Old Testament, has these sayings that might come to make you believe that the Earth is flat. It's really bad, that people are so ignorant to the facts of the Earth being a sphere rather than a disc, like they say. And if they're just, but I don't really understand the point of pointing out that people are faking it, because why would you fake believing that the Earth is flat to like fit in with them? I don't know. It's silly. Like, of course, like maybe as a joke you'll be like, oh, the Earth is flat, but that's besides the point.
But I find it exceedingly implausible they are all just faking it. To begin with, they would all have to be excellent actors. Just look at some of the videos on YouTube. Also, they are putting quite some time and in some cases money behind their conviction. And that's why most of them full well know coming out as flat earther will make others doubt their sanity. All that makes it unlikely they are just in for the fun. Now, you may want to discard flat earthers as conspiracy theorists, which some fraction of them arguably are.
They are pretty much all conspiracy theorists. It's all rooted in some sort of false belief. Like wanting to interpret the Bible one for one is an example. Like I said, right? In literally interpreting the words of people from thousands of years ago that didn't even know what atoms were. They didn't even know, they didn't know jack squat about physics, chemistry, biology in the times when the Bible was written. I bet they even knew what life really meant, like early philosophy, right? Like, what is life? They probably didn't even understand that trivial of stuff. But anywho.
But I think that would be somewhat unfair to most of them.
And they are pseudoscientists. They are. And some people are just crazy like that. They just want to believe everything is a lie. Just to be different, I think. I don't understand the point of literally going against mountains of evidence. Here's the scale, okay? I don't know if you can see me right now, but the scale for round Earth is all the way up here. There's so much evidence pointing to it being a round Earth. And there's minute observations by people that might hint to the Earth being flat. And it's not flat. Okay, it's not. You can't really prove anything in science, but you can basically say something to an unfathomably correct degree. And that is the idea of why flat earth is wrong, because we have substantially proven that the earth is round, or we have substantially unproven that the earth is flat, even though you might observe that the earth might be flat. It's pseudoscience, they are ascientific, and they reject science.
To understand why, it helps to have a look at the history of the Flat Earth Society. The Flat Earth Society goes back to an Englishman by name Samuel Rowbotham, who lived in the 19th century. He was a medical doctor who believed he had proved that the Earth is flat, and then complained for the rest of his life that the supposed scientific authorities ignored him. He referred to his method as sceticism, after the Greek word sitio, to seek. By sceticism, he meant an extreme version of the philosophy of empiricism. Rowbotham's philosophy, which is still the philosophy of flat earthers today, is that if you want to understand nature, you should only rely on information from your own senses. You can't.
That's stupid, because our own senses, in the terms of like understanding planets. Planets are huge. Like, I'm not sure. Let's actually search this up. Diameter of the Earth. Okay? I just want you to understand. 7,926 miles in diameter to get to one side from the other. That's in a sphere. And the volume of the Earth, specifically, they're saying 260 billion cubic miles. So if you can think of a volume, that's a huge, huge amount. And you can't fathom that with your own senses. Your senses are built for the level of complexity and size of which you exist in. And you exist on a microscopic scale compared to the Earth. These are huge bodies of mass. You are only a fraction of that. So what you see on a flat Earth is you're living on, a sphere, but when you zoom in, it appears flat, right? Because you're looking at, maybe just a very small curvature of the Earth, right? So I think this is pretty just commonly understood knowledge at this point, but it's why this form of belief is stupid, right? Because you need things that are beyond your eyes and your senses to understand. Like, for example, a huge thing that helps us is instrumentation. Instrumentation, for example, might, let's say, for example, you zap or not zap, that's a stupid word to use, but you do a study where you shoot different wavelengths of light like photons at, of differing wavelengths, thus different energies at an Earth, and you can deduce, composition. Like, I read a paper one time, they found a planet, they shot some photons at it, and it turns out that it has a prebiotically helpful organic precursor to life. Okay, I'm not going to cite anything on that, so just take that with a grain of salt, but I've read papers like that. Understanding these things that we can't observe with our senses is done with instrumentation and observation and math. Literally, it's just math and physics. It's not that hard to understand why we would need that to counteract the lack of ability of our senses being able to explain a spherical Earth.
And for example, read on the website.
And you actually can. Look out at a sea, watch a boat go due in the direction of that sea, and you will see it will slowly disappear. Why is that? Assuming there's no fog, you could observe that, right?
Website of the Flat Earth Society. The world looks flat. The bottoms of clouds are flat. The movement of the sun. These are all examples.
The bottoms of clouds are not flat if you actually went up there, which you can't observe. But if you went out there, you can even see layering of clouds. It's not a homogeneous sheet, right? A flat sheet of clouds. And I'm not too familiar with weather patterns, but I know clouds can only exist at a certain height. But even then, it's not like it's a cutoff. Like, right here is the cutoff for cloud in rain, okay? It just, if you went in a cloud, you would see its different wisps and different formations of spheres of collected water molecules right? Condensed gases, right? So kind of important to understand.
Of your senses telling you that we do not live on a spherical heliocentric world. This is using what's called an empirical approach, or an approach that relies on information from your senses. That flat earthers insist on evidence from your own senses only really is key to understanding their problem. I will come back to this. But first, let me tell you the rest of their history. After Rowbotham's death in 1884, the flat earth idea was carried forward by another British guy.
Oh, it's motionless. That's just objectively wrong. We're not, we're not geocentric. I think that's the right terminology. We're not the center of the universe. We're orbiting around the sun, and our planetary body is orbiting around, like our galaxy is orbiting around other galaxies, right? It's all moving in relation to each other, and it's based on gravity. We're not just in the center of the universe, okay? That's not how that works. So it's not flat and it's not motionless like this paper says. It's not only flat, it's motionless. No, the Earth is moving. Every planetary body is moving. It's just your reference frame, really.
Samuel Shenton, who once explained to a journalist, "No man knows the ultimate shape of the Earth, but that portion we live on is definitely flat. No one will ever know what the whole complexity is like, I suppose, because it goes beyond his sphere of observation, investigation, and comprehension."
This kind of relates to what I said earlier, right? You live on a sphere, but when you zoom in on that really, really big sphere to your own way of looking at it, you're gonna see, right, that curvature start to go like this, right? Because you're zooming in on the circle, right? You can do this. Take a sphere and bring it closer and closer and closer and closer. You're gonna see that if you were the size of a human in comparison to the size that is explained by a sphere, look how close you are, and it will be flat no matter which way you look. And of course, it will begin to curve at some point. It's just like there's limitations to how far you can look with fog and all this stuff. So hopefully that makes sense.
Again, note the emphasis on personally collected evidence. In 1954, Shenton created the International Flat Earth Society. Few people cared. He died.
The Club of Idiots, right? I bet they have like a nice clubhouse and they all talk about how stupid they are.
In 1971. After his death, the Flat Earth Society was taken over by the US-American Charles Johnson. But even after the advent of the internet, flat earthers did not attract much attention. Johnson died in...
That's good, because they're stupid, and they actually are attracting attention. Look on YouTube. There are so many people nowadays. Well, she's not wrong in saying that, because she's talking about the context of the early internet. But nowadays, there were so many stupid people. Even in my recommended, actually, there's a video by Professor Dave. Eric Dubay. He's an idiot, okay? And he's the type of guru that is pushing for a flat earth, and it is objectively wrong what he is saying. He's misleading. And there's even like some other really stupid people. Like there's, I forget his name. But if I can remember it, I will let you know. But anyways, it's stupid. Early internet, late internet, it's pretty tough. Anything's really talked about on the internet these days, and it is attracting a lot of attention, flat earth. So
in 2001, at which point the Flat Earth Society had 3,500 or so members. The job then fell to another American, Daniel Shenton, who is not related to the earlier Shenton, but whose logic falls right in line. He said in an interview with The Guardian in 2010, "I don't think there is solid proof. I'm not intentionally being stubborn about it, but I feel our senses tell us these things."
Okay, your senses tell you live on a flat earth because, again, you are on a flat plane relative to the sphere of the earth. If you think about it, you are being stubborn because there is solid proof that the earth is flat. There are so many ways to disprove a flat earth. Literally go from one end, like just using logic that basic lay people can understand. You start in North America, you take a plane going due left, due east, right? Where are you going to end up? You're not going to end up at a ice wall. You're going to end up at the other continent that you're saying is to your right. How do you explain that? You explain it with a sphere. That's just one little smidgen of evidence that says that the Earth is a sphere. So this Daniel Shenton guy, he's a real idiot.
And it would take an extraordinary...
And just because he said that, maybe he's a good guy. Maybe he's a really funny guy I have a beer with. But in terms of talking about the Earth's shape, he's an idiot.
...the level of evidence to counteract those. How many people have actually investigated it? Have you? Shenton had the idea to set up a wiki page for the Flat Earth community. Still, no one cared. But in 2016, everything changed. What happened in 2016 is that a few devout flat earthers put up videos here on YouTube. And that really got things going by way of recruiting new believers.
Okay, so I spoke a little early, right? The early internet, the late internet, right? This is kind of the time where we saw these things begin to happen. And she's absolutely right. And that's the thing with Sabine Hossenfelder. She's right on some things, and then she just gets it so wrong. And I pray to God that if I swear to God, if I see some stupid shit about physics, you know, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry myself a river. And it's like bombshells in her videos. She's on the right track, and then she says something completely stupid. And you know, maybe some of her videos have substance to it, but some of them are just objectively so wrong, like her criticisms on the world of physics. Check out like where she says that you know, physics in her realm of physics is complete bullshit. It's not, and you can see working physicists testify against what she's saying. We're not hitting a wall with physics, we're going forward. And that's my problem with Sabine Hossenfelder.
These videos have meanwhile been watched by millions of people.
What a stupid title.
And that had consequences. In a 2018 poll in the United States, 2% of...
Okay, that is a misleading statistic. I would want to check the validity of that. I do not believe that 1/3 of Americans, millennials, believe that the Earth is flat. If that is true, that is really sad about society. You know, and here's another thing. Americans are so dumb. If you asked an American, point to Afghanistan on a map, they couldn't do it. And it just shows you how uneducated Americans are. I just wish we lived in a society where when you said the word calculus, people aren't going to like lose their shit and think that they're like, you're thinking about rocket science. Calculus is not rocket science. It's like fundamental math that I think every American should just at least have the basic understanding. What's differentiation? What's integration? I think that should just be common knowledge at this point. I don't think that, you know, we're at a point where we're so misinformed that 33% of Americans think that the Earth is flat. Again, I'm not sure the accuracy of that. I bet if I went to random people, you know, I took a random sample of Americans, they would not be saying that, but who knows?
Of the respondents said they believe the Earth is flat, while another 7% are not quite sure. Reliable numbers are hard to come by, but we are meanwhile probably talking about more than 10,000 people in the developed world who reject science that was settled by the Middle Ages. Let that sink in for a moment.
This is the premium Garmin Duffel 45-liter by Halfbag. It's a transforming 2-in-1 travel duffel bag for long...
How does someone end up rejecting something as scientifically well established as the fact that the Earth is round? There is not only one reason, of course. Some flat earthers find the idea is appealing for religious reasons, others are of the crowd.
Okay, so far in the 7 minutes and 42 seconds, she has been accurate. But her point of making this video, if you look at the title, Flat Earth Science is not wrong, but is not stupid. Okay, I want to know why you think that these people have any sort of credibility to them.
Who think NASA is evil, space is a fake, and the moon landing didn't happen. But mostly it's because they think they are merely being rational skeptics. They have not themselves been able to prove the Earth is round, so they believe they are only reasonable when they request evidence. CNN, for example, reports from a Flat Earth conference. Like most of the speakers at the event CNN spoke to, he was convinced after he decided he couldn't prove the Earth's roundness.
If you can't prove with basic logic that the Earth is round, you are just objectively an idiot. I'm politically left, right? If we have our own president saying, like, as of now, I'm left. I don't really know because, like, with relations to the presidential choices we had, I'm left because if our president is saying that Tylenol causes autism in pregnant women, I really think that he shouldn't be fit for office, or he should get a better health counsel. Yet again, I'm going to criticize CNN here. How do your reporters not know that the Earth is round? How can they not prove that with basic logic? You are appointing people to report things. They should at least have some basic understanding of how the Earth is not flat. Although I guess, it's not the most important thing, right? They're reporting on very important things happening in, let's say, like Israel-Palestine conflicts, right? You don't really need to know that the Earth is round for that, but I feel like there should just be a bar of education that most people, reporters, should understand. And I feel like if you're preparing yourself to go to a flat Earth conference where the majority of people believe that the Earth is round, I think you should at least do at least a little smidget of research, in that regard.
I want to leave aside here that, of course, you cannot, strictly speaking, prove any empirical fact.
You can't prove it, but you can unfathomably support it to the point where it's basically a fact, basically proven, and it's like evolution's, the Earth, cell theory. It's basically proven at this point where we just take it as fact as scientists. But it's never really been proven. You can't prove anything in science, right? You can't say with 100% confidence evolution exists, but you can say with 99.99999% confidence that it does. Basically 100.
Prove mathematical identities. So more precisely, we should speak of seeking evidence that disfavors the hypothesis that the Earth is flat, of which there is plenty, starting with the historical evidence about how stellar constellations shift if you travel, how the length of shadows changes, to Newton's 1/r² force law, that is the law for a sphere, not a disk, not to mention Einstein and gravitational redshift and the perihelion precession of Mercury, and so on and so forth.
That was a lot of physics jargon I do not understand, but she's probably right. All these things point to the Earth being a globe, not a disk, and she's absolutely right in saying that, but please tell me how these people are not stupid.
The problem that
because they are stupid.
Flat earthers have is that they cannot do most of these observations themselves. So if you buy the idea that it's only your personally collected evidence that you should accept, then it seems you cannot refute the idea that the Earth is flat. And so Flat Earthers' philosophy forbids them to accept scientific fact. Needless to say, if you want to hold on to your convictions, it helps if you refuse to do observations that could speak against them. There are actually many ways to convince yourself that the Earth is round, which are not that technically difficult. Buy a telescope and try to explain the motions of the moons of Jupiter, for example. So, what's wrong with Flat Earthers' attitude? Isn't asking for evidence exactly what rational thinkers should do? Sure. Evidence is key to scientific progress, but Flat Earthers' philosophical approach by which they reject certain types of evidence is inconsistent and ultimately logically wrong.
They have to, though. That's the problem. You cannot accept evidence and make it fit on an Earth and make it make sense with the way that we observe things from our own instrumentation. You just can't do it, and that's where Flat Earth falls apart. If you can't show any evidence for it, it doesn't exist. If you just use these basic things saying, okay, the Earth is flat because I observe it to be flat, it's just not true. It is just not true. and you can't give me any evidence for it, and your models make no sense that you propose. So Sabina has a fair point here, in the fact that they reject the facts and they use their own observations from their eyes, ears, that kind of thing, but they fail to look at the literature. But that makes them stupid, because if you don't look at the facts and make it fit on a model that actually works, you don't have a convincing theory to me, thus, that the Earth is flat. So they are still stupid.
See, the only evidence anyone ever has of anything is evidence you collect with your own senses.
Friday is company karaoke, 90s pop theme. And well, I'm something.
Except, as Descartes pointed out, evidence of your own ability to think. But this is not relevant here. Relevant is that the distinction which flat earthers are trying to draw between different types of evidence does not exist. All evidence you have is sensory input. If you hear an explanation of someone else's experiment, if you read a paper laying out someone else's argument, that's your own sensory input. A distinction which does exist, however, is that some of our sensory input requires very little decoding, while some requires a lot. Flat earthers' problem is that they refuse to decode difficult sensory input. A good example for the need to decode sensory input by conscious thought are optical illusions. Your brain tries to interpret visual input in ways that sometimes gives a misleading result, as in this example. You almost certainly think square A.
Oh, yep, I've seen this. So you think that A and B are different colors? It's an optical illusion that your brain is playing on you. This is exactly what I was saying, right? With the globe, you zoom in, it looks flat. It's an optical illusion. You can't see the curvature of the Earth really easily like you can, but it's a little... Oh, the light turned off here, this room I'm in, but you just can't really observe these things. So, anywho, let's continue and let her talk.
Is darker than square B. It is not. To understand your sensory input correctly, you need to draw on other information, in this case your knowledge about optical illusions. Your brain interprets this image as if it was a natural three-dimensional scene, and therefore calculates back to the original color of the squares, taking into account what a...
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? I kind of like this optical illusion. It's kind of cool, right? This color and that color don't look the same because of the shadow playing a trick on your head to make you think that the hue is different. But when you draw a bridge, connecting the colors to show, a similar shade, there's no discontinuity in the color. So you just think that you see it's the same color is what I'm trying to get at. So kind of interesting. I appreciate her pointing this out, but we're now 11 minutes in. We have 4 minutes to go, and you have not explained how they are not stupid. So go ahead and explain that, please.
It appears to be a shadow. This is the wrong interpretation if you want to know the actual color of pixels on the screen. The lesson is, if you do not think about your sensory input, if you do not properly decode it, you arrive at the wrong conclusion. Flat earthers similarly arrive at the wrong conclusion by failing to decode evidence, indeed by simply ignoring a lot of evidence that their own senses deliver. This is evidence about how society and how science works. Whether we are scientists or not, we all constantly use this evidence to navigate life, and I'm sure flat earthers are no exception. Just consider going to the supermarket and buying canned soup. Do you have evidence that what's in the can is edible? Probably not. For one, the can's closed. And if you're anything like me, you probably have no idea how or where or by whom it was produced. Why then are you not afraid of eating canned soup? Isn't this entirely irrational? No, because you do have evidence that canned soup...
I think her point here is that they just don't understand what's going on. And that's true, because they're stupid. So please, for the love of God, tell me how. They're not like... I should say, they're just so ignorant to observation, where they just take their own visualization, like the can of soup, right? That somehow changes. So, anywho, I want to know why they're not stupid still. They are really dumb for that. because it's ignorance, and ignorance is stupid. If you're an ignorant person, you're also a stupid person.
Is edible. You know how the legal system in your country works. You know that there are regulations on what can be sold as food in a supermarket. You know that if what's in that can was harmful to you, then a lot of people along the food chain would be punished for their mistake, and they don't want that. Your trust in canned food is an entirely reasonable inference from evidence, evidence that you collected with your own senses, because what else could you possibly have collected it with? Now let's come back to flat earthers. Most of you don't have a physics degree, and chances are that after learning...
And you don't need a physics degree to believe that the Earth is round. Okay, I think I really see her point now, is that they're just going off of their own observations. Okay, you observe that there's flatness at your level of the Earth. But that just is so ignorant to just use that and think the Earth is flat. You have been taught your whole life that the Earth is round, so you should make the inference. If everyone's saying it, it must be true. Okay, but they're not making baseless claims. You know, there's some people saying the Earth is flat, so there's the same argument there that I'm making. But then if you look at the evidence, if you are not convinced that what everyone is saying is true, that the Earth is round, look at the evidence and you will find that it is indeed a sphere. So by her saying that they're not stupid, that is stupidity. That is literal stupidity. You know, if you're told something about the Earth, you can imagine it to be flat. You should be reasonably able to discern, you know, if you question these things, look at the evidence and you'll find that it is indeed a sphere. So,
learning in school how we know the Earth is round, you didn't think much about it ever again. By and large,
and that's ignorance and that's stupidity.
Probably confident it's correct because what you learned in school was plausible, and you know it is widely taught to children, and you know that your government strives to give children in your country a scientifically accurate education. So you have good...
Yeah, and that's why I think we should not teach, fundamental Old Testament religion in schools. I think we should have religion courses for people that want to make that distinction themselves. But I don't understand why a human being cannot interpret that the Earth is indeed a sphere. Okay, you can prove it with basic logic that disproves a flat Earth, and what else do I have to say?
Good reason to think the knowledge you were taught is backed by solid scientific evidence.
Here's something most drivers don't know. The older your car,
this is AI, by the way,
the cheaper your insurance should be.
I hate AI. It's like, well, actually I like AI. It helps me with diff-EQ. If I don't know how to do a Laplace transform like Gemini, walk me through the steps on how you solve this Laplace transform or the second order DE or some shit like that. But the amount of scams that are happening, like this is a rabbit hole you can go down, with shoemakers or bag makers. There's this whole handcrafted AI story that they're making with this kind of thing, and it's very, very misleading because you're not getting a handcrafted thing by a retired shoemaker. No. It's really some cheap, mass-produced Chinese bag that you're getting, or watch, or whatever they're making. So AI is a very bad thing. Sorry to interject. We're talking about flat Earth here, not AI, but AI is being used for scams. This is one of them, probably. Because if you're using AI, you're probably not that, to me at least, you're not very reputable.
There is no appealing to authority here. You have totally yourself collected all this evidence about how society works. You have also yourself collected lots of evidence that science works. Any airplane, any laptop, any pair of glasses is evidence that science works. It's evidence that the system works. It's evidence for how the whole world works.
I really hope we don't see Sabine Hossenfelder's rhetoric where the system is right, but it seeked me out and it hates me and it took all my funding away. No, you're just an asshole. Sorry to physicists specifically. These people are objectively stupid. They, like, intelligence wise, if you're at an IQ above, here's a funny story. America has been so bad with misinformation. So my geography professor was like, how many Americans are in America? And I said, like, a reasonable answer. It was wrong, but reasonable, 300 million. Okay, because we're in hundreds of millions of people in the United States. And the person that was, another person raised their hand, and this was before I gave my answer. He said 1 million. Okay, he said 1 million. There was 1 million people in, like, Philly. Let's see, population of Philadelphia. 1.5 million people are in Philadelphia alone, right? That city in PA. Okay, so I don't understand, like, people. Sabina brings up a good point. Everyone has such tunnel vision based on what they observe with their eyes, right? You know, you only will pass about a couple thousand people, right? You live in a unique people because you live in a small community. Maybe you pass a little bit more than that. Maybe, you know, at day to day, right? You'll pass about 1,000 people, or more. You can reasonably deduce that in your little circle you have 1,000 people, right? 1,000 so people. Scale that up, because you're looking at, like, maybe a surface area of a couple hundred square miles, depending on how far you drive, you know, day to day. You would interpolate through all the other regions in the world. You know, density is not homogeneous in America, but you would deduce that, you know, you would scale it up, right? This is just logical thinking. Someone whose IQ isn't 0 would interpret, but there are people in colleges now that believe that America's population is 1 million or a couple million, and that is just objectively, unfathomably, disprovably false. Okay? And that is when you become a stupid person. You don't become a stupid person, you're just stupid or you're intelligent. That is just plain stupidity, and it brings me back to my point here. If you cannot reasonably articulate why the earth is round and why it's not a flat disk, if you can't reasonably interpret why that works, you literal 5th graders can understand why the earth is round. Okay? It's not hard. And if you can't see that, I'm sorry, but you're just stupid, and you're either stupid or stupid and ignorant. Okay, one of the two. Misinformed and stupid, or ignorant and stupid. One of the two.
So, if you cannot recall just what experiments demonstrate that the Earth is not flat,
The literal airplane example is so obvious. Take an airplane and you will see. Take a ship and you will see that the Earth is round. And it can logically be explained that way. There's more complex things, but that's not something a lay person would understand, right? Like rotation of the Earth, or, you know, the cosmic bodies and how they all move with relation to each other. That requires mathematics. That's not something I could just pull out of my ass, right? I can pull, or not my ass, out of my brain. You can just think of things that make sense with a round Earth that cannot be disproven with a flat Earth. Okay, why does the sun disappear? I feel like a broken record here, but if you can't understand that, you're just dumb. I'm sorry, you're just dumb.
or if you cannot immediately figure out what's wrong with flat earthers' arguments, there's no shame in rejecting their claims.
No, there is shame in rejecting that claim, because to reject a claim scientifically, and scientifically also runs hand in hand with reasonably, is because you cannot, as a human, look at what someone has all this evidence that says the earth is flat. So you're given the claim that the earth is a sphere. No, it's not flat. If I give you the claim the earth is round, the earth is a sphere, okay, and your immediate thing is to disprove that, but you don't give any evidence to why, you say, oh, the earth is flat because it looks flat, okay, but I'm telling you that observation is not right. The earth is round. It goes against what you think. Disprove that to me without using that I see that the earth is flat, because that doesn't make much sense, okay? Do that to me. And then if you can articulate that, you're at least not stupid. You're probably just stupid and ignorant at that point. If you still think the earth is flat after looking through all the evidence, you're just ignorant and stupid. Okay? I'm sorry.
Because your rejection is based on evidence that science works. What's wrong is that flat earthers claim they are leading a scientific argument, but there is no scientific argument about whether the earth is flat. This argument was settled long ago. Instead, flat earthers' argument is about whether you should trust evidence that other people have collected before you. And it's an important argument because this trust is essential for society and science.
So yeah, trust in science is a thing a lot of people don't see, and it's because of misinformation. Those gurus on YouTube, the anti-vaxxers that are just objectively lying, our own fucking president, okay? It's like, this shit is like awful. The misinformation crisis in America is terrible, and it's plaguing the intelligence of mankind, at least in America, that, even like, well, like Africa's education, and like Asia, Southern Asia, they're in Middle East, that whole area of the world. They're not, but if they had that education, they would be, we're so ignorant because of the gift of development that we were given, that we can just like not be grateful for what science has done for us, that we have the education and the intelligence of a literal like rat. Like some of these people have the brains of rats. Vaccines, for example, people get scared about. I think they're called amalgams amalgamating agents. That's probably not the exact terminology they use, but they use mercury and aluminum. You're not injecting people with raw aluminum and raw mercury. You're not doing that. It's an agent, okay? If you ate solid iron, it would not be good for you. You would probably, that would be awful. It'd probably be very dangerous to eat just raw iron. But we see iron in the forms of heme and iron oxide, okay? These things are, and like magnesium, if you ate, here's an even better example, sodium metal. If you eat elemental sodium metal, it would go in your system and literally explode you, because of the fact that sodium wants to lose its electron, and it will do so very, very violently to reach an octet by going down a energy level, right? Reducing its Q quantum number from 1 to 0. I think that's how that works. I might be misquoting quantum physics here, but I hope you get the point. These people are just like, and with the mercury amalgam thing, these things are not harmful, okay? They're not in their elemental form. They're in a different form, and when an element's in a different form, it's not the reactive form. Like uranium, the reactive isotope of uranium is not comparable to the unreactive form of uranium, right? Because it's unreactive. Uranium oxides, right? They can be regenerated to be reactive, I think, but they can't go the other way. Shouldn't say that, but it's not as reactive, that non-elemental reactive form of uranium. And in vaccines like mercury and aluminum, right, they're bound to these complexes of things, right, and they're helpful, and we find that that's the only metal that could really do it safely, that we understand at that point, right? There might be some advances there, but we don't know. And ignorance and not looking at, okay, The average human would say elemental mercury is probably not good. So why are they putting mercury species in vaccines? Look at, is it harmful? It wouldn't have passed the FDA process if it was harmful. Okay, and of course there's outliers to that. Is there any evidence it's harmful? The answer is no. Any evidence that was done with controlled variables and has actual correlated data. That's not BS. But anywho, I digress. Let's keep moving here.
To progress. The only alternative we have is that each and every one of us has to start over from scratch with birth. You see, flat earthers would eventually figure out the earth is round, but it might take them 1,000 years until they've reinvented modern science. This is why I think scientists should take flat earthers' philosophical problem seriously. It's a problem that any scientifically advanced...
And we do. We try and explain to flat earthers why the earth is a sphere, but they're either too stupid or too ignorant to come to the ideal outcome that we have found, that the earth is round. They're just too ignorant to understand that. I don't, like, we as a community, we often shame flat earth because it's stupid, but we also try and explain why it's stupid, okay? They're just dumb at the end of the day, okay?
Advanced society must address. It is not possible for each and every one of us to redo all experiments in the history of science. It therefore becomes increasingly important that scientists provide evidence for how science works, so that people...
We do. It's called science classes. You've taken my science in school, 7th, 8th grade. I had science even before that, basic science. But all in high school, I had a science course every year. Every single day. I had chemistry, AP bio, physics, and earth science. So you are being taught science. You're being taught how science works. It's just that kids would rather play Fortnite and listen to skibbity brain rot, that they don't give a shit about science, okay? That's just part of it, okay? So I think the problem that I'm taking with this video, and the reason that this video is harmful, what she says, the substance of the video is okay. Okay, I just disagree with the title. Okay, somebody who is in the flat earth community is going to look at this and say, we're not stupid. She doesn't agree with us, but we're not stupid. We have good points, right? If you're just quickly taking that information from the title, or you're looking at, we need to take flat earthers more seriously, that hints at the fact that what they're saying might be right without looking at the video. And that's the harm in it. She avoids saying objectively wrong things, but then kind of just match switches the way that she presents it is that we need to take flat earth more seriously. They're not stupid. I think they're wrong, but they're not dumb. They have some substance to them. And then in the video she just says they have no substance to them. They're just stupid and ignorant, which directly counteracts which the topic was about. It's clickbait. It's literal clickbait. And she is, I wouldn't say Sabine is a complete pseudoscientist, but the way that she presents things is scummy, to say the least. I want to just take you now to her page.
Einstein, what?
What? Did MIT researchers just stupid shit like that? This is just these titles are misleading. We know that Einstein's theory of general relativity is correct. Gravity is the bending of space fabric. Okay, it's a way to model the way that the universe works. That's not hard to understand. It made the idea of gravity, okay? Or it works with the idea of gravity. So it's not hard to understand. Like, just stupid things like this, right? But my biggest issue are these videos here. Her most popular, My Dream Died and Now I'm Here, asked to keep this confidential. Some of this stuff is okay. What's this? Sugar alcohol has ruined my health. Maybe there's some substance to that. I'm not sure. I'd have to look deeper into that. and like this is probably her mocking some sort of physical theory. The problem is that she's just objectively critical about things that she understands physics, but she's objectively lying about it to make herself feel better. She, failed as a scientist, right? She didn't make any real good plausible theories, and she's mad about that. And then she pushes why academia is stupid. This is harmful. It's going to lead to the reducing of funding in scientific programs, right? I bet Donald Trump, probably looks at these videos like, oh my God, I hate science now. We're not going to fund it. A lot of funding has been cut from universities from that douchebag. So, Sabine, you can thank yourself for being a contributing factor to that. And overall, she's just an asshole. I want to take us now to a follow-up video you can watch that kind of just talks about why I take big issue in Sabine Hossenfelder. And it's this video right here. The problem with Sabine Hossenfelder. Please take a look at these videos by Professor Dave. They're very good. Further Exposed, this is a really good video on why her... this is probably an even better one. Science is not failing. She thinks science is failing. It's not failing. Watch all these videos, please, because they are very informative on why what her rhetoric is with the field of physics is completely wrong and bullshit. Contradictory to what she's saying, which she says, oh, physics is bullshit. It's not bullshit. Okay, so please take a look at some of these videos as like a follow-up if you want more information. He has like 5 good videos. Oh, God. How about we do another reaction? Pi equals 4. I gotta see this.
A circle with diameter 1 has circumference pi. A square with side length 1 has circumference 4. Let's change the circumference of the square by chopping off some squares in the edges. This doesn't change the circumference.
This is true. The square is 4, but the circle circumference is pi.
At all, so it's still equal to 4. If we keep on doing this, we eventually...
Okay, take the limit as the amount of steps reflects that of a circle, but the steps are still there. I think Sabine will talk about this, hopefully.
Get a circle which proves that pi equals 4. This can't be right, can it? If you want to think about it, pause the video here. The proof is right up until the last step. The procedure only shows that the areas inside the two shapes approach each other. It doesn't show that the length of the...
And right, this is okay, I'm glad that she's not saying pi is 4. I've heard pi is 3. Okay, fair enough. Depends the application and the magnitude of accuracy. But it's 3.14159 and whatever, right? It's not 4. So if she would have said that, I would have said, okay, she's completely off her rails. Pi does not equal 4 because if you shrink it down, you're taking a limit as you approach infinity for the step lengths. The step lengths are still there. There's a vertical and a horizontal component, and that is different from a sphere, which is a smooth surface, okay? It's a smooth surface. So the steps, right? The steps are there. It's not a smooth surface. So what the sphere is doing is it's going kind of over the step size, and the step size has a y and x component where the sphere is kind of an amalgamation of that, right, taking an average. But the circumference negates the fact that you're taking all of the y and all of the x of those steps. We just can't see it because it's so infinitesimally small. Okay, hopefully that is helpful. If you were curious why pi is not 4 based on this experiment, that's a more easier way to kind of think about it. So that's going to wrap up this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Sabine Hossenfelder, she's not the worst anti-science person I've ever seen, but science is not failing like she likes to say. And flat earthers are stupid, and they will continue to be stupid until there are no longer flat earthers, okay? So take care, everyone. Hope you learned something today.